Good evening. Let me welcome you to the Policy Development Committee for Tuesday, November the 7th, 2023. Attendance has been taken. We have regrets from Councillor Coleman, which is why I'm sitting in the chair this evening, and we have Councillor Kyle online. If I could move to the approval of the agenda, there is a request from a gentleman in the audience, Chuck Beach, to speak to item 8.3 as a delegate. So I would appreciate if somebody could make that recommendation. Mayor Bailey, thank you. The seconder, John McAlpine, thank you very much. On that basis, unless there are other changes we would like to make to the agenda, would somebody like to make a motion to approve? Councillor Pearce, Councillor Oakley. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. If anybody has a pecuniary interest, if they could declare it at the time, if you don't know it right now, then we'll move right into delegations and we'll invite Chuck Beach to come up and speak. Chuck, if you could just introduce yourself with your address and just for the benefit of everyone, just say what it is you'd like, the headline of what you'd like to say.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. I was a little late on getting my delegation request in, but what I'm here tonight to do is to support the recommendation of 8.3 to proceed with a climate change action plan by council. And just a little bit of background. A number of years ago, the provincial government brought forward legislation that required all municipalities to have a demand management plan. And you good folks had you had to develop a 5-year plan, and you did in 2014 with very good objectives. And it lasted till 2019, and then there were 2 years delay where you were out of compliance with the legislation. You weren't doing your measuring like you were supposed to. I was after CAO Bradley to do something about that. And then in 2019, you passed an emergency climate change. And here we are. And my concern was that you don't have a plan. And so I met with Mr. Mayor and I met with your CAO, and I'm delighted tonight to see that you're setting a path forward for a climate change action plan. My question to you in the future, however, is who's minding the store? Who's keeping track that things are going the right way? Because was it COVID? Was it staff? Was it councillors that missed the boat on this? I don't know. But you can't have an emergency declaration and not have a plan for 5 years. So I encourage you, I'm encouraged tonight that you are putting in motion the effort to have a plan. And speaking of environmental plans, and climate change is a big deal. It's important that we teach our children about it. Are we really going to close Apps Mill, the only place in town, the only stop shop for the city and the county where children get outdoor education? Gosh, I hope not. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me, and I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Chuck. Just to let you know that the mayor of Brantford and myself, we do have our eye on Apps Mill, and we are following it very closely, and we understand its importance.
Yes, critically important, and I'm hoping that this council. I don't know how we save Apps Mill. I used to work at SC Johnson, so it's just another stab. So I don't know how we save Apps Mill, but my gosh, it is a gem, and I look I hope you folks will support whatever it takes to keep it around. Thanks so much.
Councillor House?
I move to receive as information.
Thank you. And we could perhaps consider it as in our thinking on item 8.3 as well. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Bailey, I thought you raised your hand. Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. We'll move on to item 5, which is the adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. Can I get a mover? Councillor Oakley, thank you. Councillor Pearce is scratching his head, or he's approving. Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, any questions, any corrections required to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favour? Those against? Carried. Business arising from the minutes. Does anybody have any questions on the matters from the minutes? If not, I do have one which I'd like to pass to Heather Boyd, if I may. We had Erin Sleeth and Paul Emerson come to talk to us about master planning for the hospital, the new hospital. Can you tell us if there are any updates to the information she sent to us and shared with us? Because there was some questions raised on the evening. And second part of the question, will we be able to incorporate our requirements for funding in our long-term financial plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we were actually talking to our consultants on the long-term plan this afternoon. We went over some scenarios for the hospital and where we were last presentation in terms of where they thought we were going to need for money. So we are working through some thoughts and systems and plans for that. I think the next step is Heather Mifflin will be reaching out to the city to talk to them about their plan for the funding commitment, and then probably talking to the hospital as well about where they think we might end up in terms of like donations and the other partners in this community contribution.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, moving on to item 7.1, consent items to be approved. There is one, it's RPT 04/2023 behaviour policy. This is being presented by Sarah Dredge. Does Sarah wish to speak to this? You're just wishing to answer questions. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Garneau. Any comments or questions to Sarah? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess it's on page 21 of our package. It speaks in there in regards to the forms that'll be filled out. And I support this, but a couple of questions I have. It talks about the forms. Now, do these forms go, let's say you've got a kid that's come in every year. Do these forms does it go year to year, or is it just for that specific program and then they're done?
So through the chair to Councillor Pearce. So the forms are specific to the program. However, we have it running from like a September to the following August year. Particularly, this applies to mainly our after-school program and our summer camps, just because the participants are there for a longer duration of time where there's a greater potential for that risky behavior. So really it just overlaps between after school program and camp, and then it kind of just gets filed away and we start all over the following year. Keeping in mind that if somebody is removed from program, which that's typically not our goal, we like to work with the parents and the participants to avoid being in that situation. So we have action plans put in place to ensure that, you know, we're successful as staff and that the participant has a successful experience at program.
Right, perfect. Yeah, and I got that. I like the way it's like a tier system, so that's a good idea. One other one, if I could, on that same page, it talks about that the form will be sent home. In the first paragraph, it talks about disciplinary form, which will be sent home and returned to staff. And then a couple paragraphs down, it says all discipline letters will be sent out at discretion of the recreational coordinator. So is it that the coordinator can decide whether something is sent home? Like a form will be filled out and it's up to the coordinator to decide whether it'll be sent home or not?
Yeah, for sure. Kind of get into more of the forms being sent home for getting into like a reoccurrence situation. For the most part, we're able to talk to parents when they pick up at program. So we kind of fill out the form together, and then it's just basically signing off that they acknowledge that there has been an issue at program, and we kind of come up with solutions on how we can make things better.
Okay, I wonder if so more as it's just documenting the situation.
Absolutely.
So everybody's, okay, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I had one more, no, I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, Sarah, thank you. I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Motion carried. There are no consent items to be received, so I'll move on to staff reports. And item 8.1 is RPT 0455 23, review of fence bylaw 5403. It's a county initiated review, and Jessica Kitchen and Pam Doosling and Greg Bergeron. Half the county is coming up to tell us a story. Before we go into this, Pam, for the benefit of people listening, this is not the first time we've talked about this issue. In fact, I think we talked about it 3, 4, 5 times. 5 times, thank you. So I'm going to make an appeal to committee that we don't regurgitate commentary we've had before, and that we concentrate on what is in this report. And there is a staff proposed or preferred option. So one way we can shortcut this is perhaps for somebody to put an option on the table that we can debate if necessary, and then staff can answer questions to that proposal. Would anybody like to make a proposal for an option? Oh. Councillor Kyle, are you wishing to make a proposal here?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair, through you, I would propose that we move option 2, the staff recommendation, and if I have a seconder, then I would make some comments.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Mayor Bailey seconds that, so please go ahead and make your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to committee, I think everyone knows that I was one of the most vocal about this particular topic, and I want to reiterate that it certainly has nothing to do with me being against pool safety. It is absolutely of utmost importance. So I think of the 3 options that are presented here, option 2 does present the most moderate approach. I think I did reach out to Jessica, and she confirmed that option 2 is the only change from option 3 in a previous iteration was the change from the metric to the imperial measurement, which I do admit makes things a little bit easier at a quick glance for people to really gauge what the depth is. While it's not the perfect option, I would really have loved to see some other way we could work with the temporary pools. It does present a reasonable option, in my opinion. So I think I would like to move forward with option 2 if the rest of committee is in agreement with that. But what I would ask is that we do include a comprehensive communication plan as part of option 2 that could be included in the budget for 2024, because I do think that around the county, even at 23.5 inches, there's probably a lot of pools that are temporary in nature that people aren't thinking about and have on their radar as something that's not compliant with the bylaw. And I think if I flip through some of the information that was provided as the attachments, there was one that was from a Colin Smith from, I believe it was Intact, from the insurance. And his comment here was that we recommend the county consider these guidelines when updating their bylaw. When a municipality fails to enforce a bylaw, it can result in public safety concerns. And that really struck me because I do know that our approach to bylaw is reactive, not necessarily proactive. So I think the strategic communications plan around this change, even though, yes, it is actually providing more depth than what is currently allowed, I think would be really important and go a long way to helping get people in compliance without having to go out and shut them all down, so to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Perhaps staff could just, for the benefit of those listening, just articulate what option 2 is.
Sure, thank you, Chair Bell. We did have a presentation planned this evening, but in the essence of time, I think staff are okay to just answer questions. Just to recap, there were 3 options. We did not recommend one in this report. We have previously recommended option 2. Option 1 was keeping what we currently have today in the county, which is the most restrictive. Jessica, I think that's 16 inches deep. The second option was a middle ground, which is the standard industry and proves to be more flexible than what we have today. And that option is 23 inches, 23 and a half inches. And option 3 is to regulate only permitted or permanent swimming pools and deregulate temporary pools when that would be including a definition. So again, the preferred option is 2, which is that middle ground at 23.5 inches.
Thank you. So we'll call upon you to answer questions. Questions from the committee, Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I know the staff's done some research on this, and I'm wondering if you could help educate us, or educate me at least. I'm looking at the difference between 16 inches and 23 and a half inches, and understanding that up until now, or currently, our rule related to the temporary pools is at the 23 inches, 23 and a half inches level, I think. No? So I'll finish my question first, and then you can completely educate me. But if a toddler falls into a temporary swimming pool, is the idea that they can stand up and breathe at 16 inches? And can they still do that at 23 and a half? I'm trying to understand the difference related to child safety with those 2 dimensions. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Howes. So I think that it's about always monitoring pools whenever anyone is around to the best of the ability. The idea is that the otherwise and commonly referred to kiddie pools that fall under the 23 and a half inches are easily emptied after use, and that they're typically monitored during use. So that's the idea. The standard falls across other municipal approaches. So option 2 is very consistent with what we've seen through the environmental scan as far as municipal approaches to the regulation of swimming pool enclosures.
If I can follow up a little bit, please, Mr. Chair. Option 1, which is the most restrictive of the 3 options, the rules within option 1 are in line with what our rules are today, right? And that's 16 inches, not 23. So we're, and I still am looking for a little bit more information based on your research in other communities. But yes, we want people to be monitoring their kiddie pools all the time. But if a child wanders into a neighbor's yard and falls into a kiddie pool that's 23 and a half inches deep, can a toddler stand up and breathe at 23 and a half inches? I'm interested.
Through the chair to Councillor Howes, that's a difficult question to answer. I can report that there's been 3 drownings this past summer in Ontario, all 3-year-old children. One that I'm aware of is they actually drowned on the cover of the pool, so it doesn't take much water for a toddler to drown. And I think it all depends on the age of the child and if they're able to stand up. We've kind of gone away from the 16 inches and recognizing that kiddie pools are quite popular, and normally the parents are very watchful when there's a kiddie pool. So we didn't really want to capture that in the bylaw. So I think we kind of took the moderate ground where, we kind of increased the number of inches that a pool can have without requiring an enclosure. But the danger is always there, and there's nothing that will replace, parental supervision.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Bergeron just answered my question there, but the 23 and a half inches, that's the depth of the water or the pool?
Through the chair, I believe it's the water. It's how much water is actually in the pool.
Okay, so hypothetically, if somebody were to have what will be classified as a, quote, permanent pool, let's just say they put 23 inches of water in the bottom of it, they don't need a fence?
I believe that's correct. I think that's how that reads.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, just not a question, but a comment. I thought this was a good report. I thought there was enough context and background. I'm supporting option 2 as well. I appreciate the fact that staff reached out to Intact Insurance. I like it when they look at other municipalities and what they're doing. And then Councillor Kyle did mention maybe strong messaging when this does pass and go out. Because somewhere in there, I can't remember where, but Greg touched on it too. You can have all the bylaws in the world and all the fencing in the world, but at the end of the day, it's situational awareness, it's a parental awareness that's going to prevent a tragedy at the end of the day. So I'm in favor of option 2.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you. I just ask a question, and I'm mindful on the not rehashing the past things because I've been one of the more vocal folks on this as well. And when I look to option 2 in the restrictiveness, it seems to be in terms of we're being more permissive in the depth of the quote kiddie pool, which leads me to then ask my question about the big kid pools. That is to say the ones that are temporary and seasonal, bigger than the 23.5 inches and would currently be covered by that locked and removable ladder provision in the bylaw. Where do these guys fall in option 2, please?
Through the chair. That's correct. There is provisions for the locking of the ladder and making sure that the walls are, I believe it's 4 feet. I think that's being recognized. So we've added a clause in the bylaw to recognize that to continue.
Thank you.
Councillor McAlpine.
Okay. So, and I just wanted to confirm something along that line. So, you're still requiring though a fence, and that's the way it's always been around a pool that's still at that 4 foot height or 24 inches or more, right?
Through the chair, generally that's correct. There are some situations, as I've explained to Councillor Garneau, where the walls of the pool could be recognized as a portion of the fence, provided that the ladder is lockable and there's no means to climb it inside the pool.
So if they had that lockable or removable ladder, then they wouldn't need the surrounding fence. Is that correct?
Yep, I've just conferred here. That's correct.
Okay.
Any further questions? Seeing none, then I'm going to call the vote on the recommendation to accept option 2. All those in favour? Those against? Motion carried. Thank you to staff and appreciate all the work you've done on the fence bylaw. This allows you now to move forward and complete what has been a long project. Thank you. Next item is item 8.2, RPT 0380, consultation plan for structure, brackets, bridge, stroke, culvert, closure or conversion. Mark, do you wish to speak to this, or do you wish to answer questions? Okay, Mark just wishes to answer questions, so would somebody like to put the recommendation on the floor? Councillor Howes, seconded by Councillor Miller. Questions to Mark? Councillor Miller.
Just, yeah, I want to just this forward because, as it says in the report, the province got rid of the need for a Class EA on when the bridge is closed, and it's kind of bad timing for the county. But I think this is a very good strategy. I think it gives input. Just one quick question, and that is talks about maybe heritage. So I didn't see the Heritage Committee. Maybe they should be CC'd on, or at least notified if any of these are of heritage nature. But I don't recall any of them. But I'll ask you, Mr. Chair DeMarc, are any of these would any of these possible bridge closures be considered a heritage bridge or historical?
Through the chair, to Councillor Miller. Anything over 40 years old has to go through the process to determine if it has any heritage value. And we typically don't reach out to the Heritage Committee as a part of that. We do our own due diligence and do our own check as to the nature of the structure, how it was built, the design, to determine if it is. And it's done on anything over 40 years, which is surprising for a structure that it's at that level, but that's where it is for bridges.
Okay, 40 years. So growing up on the farm, all our equipment was of heritage nature. So, okay, thank you.
Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A comment, if I may. I want to thank staff for this because the closure of a lot of these bridges and culverts disproportionately affects the rural communities. So having a process that residents can see going forward, I think, is a positive step. I was encouraged to see in it a reference to newspaper advertising, and I really just wanted to comment on the importance of that. I know it comes at a cost, but particularly in the rural communities where folks are not as connected online, to make sure that we are buying those ads, and just to our boundary communities as you head east, for example, in the county, to make sure we pick up the Caledonia paper, for example, when we're looking out that way. And to the north, perhaps Ayr and others, because we may miss residents if we just turn to the Expositor. But I do want to thank staff overall because this is very well put together.
Any further questions to Mark? Councillor Chambers.
Just a comment, if I might, Mr. Chair. There's an analogy to dams and conservation authorities with bridges in municipalities, in that when the dams were built, a lot of provincial and federal funding was used to build them. And now when they're past 40 years old, they're in a state of such that they need to be rehabilitated, and there's no money from the higher levels of government, and it falls upon the local taxpayers to rehabilitate the dams. And the same thing is, in essence, happening with the bridges. Many of these bridges 40 years ago and beyond were done with supplementary funding, with provincial dollars, etc. And I know the conservation authorities have lobbied extensively the federal and provincial funders to assist with funding on dams. We should be doing the same thing through our Good Roads Association, asking for supplementary funding and additional funding for bridge repairs, because they are very, very expensive to repair, and they're very much needed in the rural areas. If you have to go around a concession, it's inconvenient, and hopefully perhaps we can put some kind of a lobbying effort through Good Roads and try and get some additional funding from the province for these things.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, and I'll call the vote on the recommendation. All those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Kyler, I'm sure, did I see your hand go up? Thank you. The recommendation is approved. Thank you, Mark. Moving on to item 8.3, which is RPT 0466, the scope of work for the Climate Change Action Plan. And Adam, do you wish to speak to this?
Oh. Mr. Chair.
Speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, before you tonight is just a very short report requesting council endorsement of the beginning the work on a climate change action plan to commence sometime in early 24 with public consultation to hopefully have a fulsome plan in front of council by the second quarter of 2024. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, we'll try and get it on the floor. So, Councillor Oakley, you're moving this? Seconder? Councillor Pearce? Questions to Adam? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Adam. Adam, I'm reading this, and you talked about the buildings a lot. In a building, in this day and age, we can get to net zero on any building. It's just a question of, do you want to spend enough money? It's easier when you're building brand new. But are we also thinking about the vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This report was very short. It could have been longer and gone into greater detail. I mean, we have, carbon capture, planting trees and forestry strategies contemplated in this. And again, obviously, electric vehicles will be a large part of any carbon reduction strategy. I think the initial focus of this report ties in much more with the energy management conservation plan, because that just focuses solely on facilities. If we were to actually do a survey and look at all the carbon emissions produced by county vehicles, that's something that we could also, obviously would significantly increase the number we see of greenhouse gas emissions corporately. But moving to electric vehicles where, applicable and necessary and capable, I think would do a lot to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions corporately.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. Thank you. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. So I hope that's the basis I would start with. See if we can get away from using it all. Period. I think I asked this a few years ago. I don't think it was you standing up there, but it might have been. Do we include what does this include when you're looking at the amount of greenhouse gases the county burns, consumes, produces? Is it just directly through the actions of county employees, or do we count contractors in there? For example, you're showing 1.3 million. Would that go up substantially, say, if we brought in, say, garbage collection in-house? Or, so we could lower that number by outsourcing all our, snow clearing. Could we cheat that way, or does that include contractors?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that number is exclusively just through our facilities, and that's electricity, natural gas, propane, and heating oil. So there's a coefficient that's applied to from a provincial standpoint. So, for example, part of our greenhouse gas emissions have reduced from 2013. We may use more electricity, but the mix and the composition of the electricity supply in Ontario has become greener. Therefore, the actual greenhouse gas emissions produced through the use of electricity have decreased. For example, it's constant with natural gas, propane, furnace oil. Obviously, furnace oil being the largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions, and natural gas heating the arenas, for example, is one of the largest contributors to that number of greenhouse gas emissions. So again, to wrap up, it's exclusively just to our facilities. It's not looking at, the amount of carbon emissions produced by the garbage, the waste collection vehicles we have, or county trucks.
Okay, and that's what I want to know, because I know, say we go to green bins, you think, well, we're doing good, but at the same time, we might see an increase in greenhouse gases. So, okay, thank you.
Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair, just a comment and then a quick question. I just want to say that I'm very happy to see this report. I concur with our delegation that it is a shame that it didn't come earlier, but obviously there were world events. So I'm very excited to see the report that will come in 2024. And my question, which I suppose is a follow-up to Councillor Miller's, which is there a way in this report and in this climate action plan that we can incorporate those other emissions so that we can't cheat by exporting some of those emissions, and so that we can work on being as carbon neutral as possible, including those emissions?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think that's become easier than it has been in previous years. I think we have more robust, GPS units in our vehicles where we could identify, the amount of miles traveled, or kilometers traveled in a year, and then define that, whether that's an EV charger or an EV vehicle, or whether that's a gas vehicle or a diesel vehicle or a snowplow or a bylaw truck. So I think that's probably a good way to cohesively understand the problem. We won't be able to sort of baseline back to 2013 as we have, but I don't think that's necessarily an impediment to actually capturing how much greenhouse gas emissions the county produces.
Thank you.
Councillor McAlpine.
Just following up on Chuck's comments, is there going to be an opportunity for public engagement in this process?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're looking at putting together a draft plan sometime in the first quarter of 24, and then bringing that for public engagement, because we know, not just through the public, but in terms of members of county staff, operationally, people understand, you know, how they operate and how they could operate in a greener fashion. You know, obviously, we have, say, the Parks and Forestry Department that is very interested in how they can contribute to greenhouse gas reduction and, you know, emission reduction and carbon capture through planting of trees. So, yeah, the short answer is yes.
Okay. Yep. So our stakeholders and everybody involved. No, much appreciated. What the work's going to be going into this, and look forward to the final report.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions of Adam? If not, I have one, Adam. The climate emergency was declared in 2019. Can you recap for the listening audience what that means?
Through Mr. Chair, I will certainly try. I didn't review it in full before writing this report. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but in effect, there was obviously a movement in 2019 discussing at you know, pretty much all levels of government, and the municipal government level certainly picked up on that there is a climate emergency, and there is, you know, urgent need for actors like municipal governments to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to avoid, you know, the increasing global temperature. So that's, as far as I understand, the need, and council did declare that in 2019, and we have, you know, as I think it was mentioned, there have been other world events that have gotten in the way, and unfortunately so. We've lost a few years, but we are here to make sure that we do what we can to catch up and play our part.
Thank you. And did we have a target by which we'd achieve net zero?
I believe it was we're envisioning somewhere in the 2030s that we could work on that. That's a lot of work and a lot of investment in facilities. Is probably the more ambitious target. I think the general target is 2050, but obviously the goalposts continue to get moved as time goes on. But we think somewhere in the 2030s is ambitious, but a reasonable target to strive for.
Thank you. One final comment to the listening audience. This, as Adam has said, this is really about the activities of the county and its direct activities. It is not an attempt to make the whole county net zero, but by doing this, I hope we set an example to others that they may follow what we do, and collectively we make an impression that is bigger than what the county alone can do. On that note, I'd like to call the question. All those in favour of the recommendation? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Adam. Item 8.4, you're staying there, Adam. This is RPT 0467. It's Municipal Support Resolution -BORELX-LT1 Large Battery Storage IESO request for proposals. Adam, I think you might need to give a little summary of what this means before I ask for somebody to move it on the floor.
Most certainly, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and through you. So before you tonight is the request from Borelex for a municipal support resolution. They're in the process of putting together a bid submission for the long-term a request for proposals from the ISO, which is the organization that provides sort of the coordinating factors for electricity generation distribution in Ontario. Some of the earlier procurements that the ISO undertook in the 2010s were the microfit and fit procurements that most people are familiar with, that brought, you know, for example, the large fit solar array, 500 kilowatt array on top of the Brant Sports Complex, which generates, I looked at the bill the other day, you know, months it produces 35 to 40,000 kilowatts of renewable energy every month, in the good months, obviously, in the summer. So this project is actually to provide on-demand electricity as needed into the grid, and it is 100 megawatts. So in relation to a 500 kilowatt renewable energy source, this is effectively 100 megawatts of on-demand electricity When you think of on-demand electricity, you think of, you know, natural gas peaker plants that provide that when we need those peak amounts of electricity in Ontario. And the ISO has projected that we'll need a significant increase in the amount of electricity on demand during on-peak times. So the municipal support resolution, in effect, provides Boralex with priority points for their application. It doesn't serve as any measures of approval. The bid submission isn't until December. The award isn't considered until probably the spring of 2024. So this is not municipal consent to proceed with the project. It is merely just a resolution that they can include in their bid submission to the ISO, that the ISO understands that the County of Brant is willing to host this project.
Thank you, Adam. I notice in the, at least in the PDF file, I think it's in the HTML file, that the executive clauses of the recommendation are not included. So for the benefit again of the listening audience, could you repeat what you're asking for, which I think is items 3 and 4?
Let me just check that.
Sorry, I'll do it. So we're missing items 2, 3, and 4 off the agenda here. So I'll go to the executive clauses.
Okay.
Do you have them?
I do. Yes, I have it in front of me. You want me to just read the enacting clauses 3 and 4? Certainly, I'm happy to. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the County of Brant supports the development, construction, and operation of the long-term reliability project on the municipal lands for purposes of the requirements of the LT1 RFP or any other long-term procurement initiatives of the ISO that are subsequent to the LT1 RFP. And then point 4, one of the purposes of this resolution is to enable the proponent to receive rated criteria points under LT1 RFP or to satisfy its obligation under any awarded LT1 contract. Rated criteria points will be used to rank the proponent's proposal in relation to the other proposals received by the ISO under the LT1 RFP. This resolution can be used to enable the proponent to receive rated criteria points and or demonstrate municipal support confirmation under any other long-term procurement initiatives of the ISO that are subsequent to the LT1 RFP.
Thank you, Adam. Would somebody like to move that motion? Councillor Oakley, seconded by Councillor Pearce. Questions for Adam or on the proposal? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more of a comment than a question, if that's okay.
Yep.
I've been reassured by staff that this project doesn't really rival our hopes for the north of the Nith project, which is in the same general geography. And I look forward to some mapping conversations, but more importantly, I wanted to highlight and reinforce the part of this report that references there is going to be an open house Thursday night at the Brant Sports Complex from 4 till 8. I believe that the average resident of the County of Brant knows little or nothing about this endeavor. And I'm just reinforcing it's an opportunity for people to come out and have some questions answered, learn a lot more about this. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us about that meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I want to note that that's November 16th, next Thursday.
Thank you. Yeah,
just for the
correct.
listening
Yeah,
public's
good point.
benefit.
Next Thursday. Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
The project might be awarded in 2024. That's what I expected. When did we actually expect to see the whole thing up and running, if everything worked out well?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe the timeline provided by Boralex is 2026 or 2027.
I know we read that somewhere, but
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair, just to comment that since we just spoke about our climate action plan, it's great to see an underutilized piece of county property going towards a green energy project like this, and I hope we see more in the future.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to hearing more. That brings us to the end of staff reports. We have no communications, but we do have some resolutions. The first resolution is from Mayor Bailey. It's a notice of motion regarding the World Council on City Data. Would you like to say anything about it, or would you like to read it out?
No. Do you want me to read it out? It's in front of you for next week. You want it read out? No? Everybody's got it? That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Item 10.2, Councillor Oakley, in regard of short-term rentals. Would you like to read your motion, or do you feel that we know enough about it already?
I'll be happy to speak to it when it comes to council.
Thank you. So you're planning to bring it forward at what meeting?
End of the month.
End of the month, thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of section 10 and brings us to the Chief Administrative Officer's update. Alison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a few updates and highlights that I want to bring to your attention. Development services, I know there's been some questions, but what appears to be a bit of a lull. They are quite busy, and they're planning pre-consultations about 4 months out at this point. And ICI permits are trending higher this year than last, primarily due to Tiger Cat, but we are expecting to see quite a busy season upcoming. The long-term financial plan, I know that's been on everyone's minds. Just a reminder that the first presentation is going to be coming to council on December the 21st. I believe those invitations are in your calendar already. Earlier this month, the county participated in the annual emergency management exercise. There will be a report coming to you from Kat Poitras to Administration and Operations Committee, but I do want to commend staff, including all of our community partners, OPP, Grand River Conservation Authority, Enbridge, I believe, was involved. Everyone did an amazing job. There were some people in, new positions, including myself, but I was really impressed at the work the staff did. So I think you should be very proud of everyone. The fire recruit graduation and long service awards are on November 15th. Just a reminder, again, should be on your calendar. And that's at the TF Warren Community Center. And those are all my updates, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Any questions for Alison? Councillor Chambers.
Just a question through you, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the emergency planning exercise. I'm assuming that was a mock something. I read it in the paper, I forget what it was. I'm just wondering if there's any provision in an emergency to notify the councillors of the emergency. I wouldn't want to have to read in the paper 2 weeks after an emergency happened and not know anything about it. Part of the protocol should be, I would think, to let the councillors know what's going on, and maybe that was something that was just not assumed to be important at the time, but would be if there was a real emergency. But just a comment.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct. So there were things in sort of the activity logs that go on during a mock exercise of, notified media of this, notified council of this, which is what you would do in a real emergency, but obviously you don't follow through in the mock exercise. So certainly there'd be a protocol to make sure that all of council, the mayor did participate in this specific mock exercise, but we would make sure that all the council members are aware of what's happening and the procedures taking place that day, and prepare them with scripts and how you can respond, that sort of thing, in a real emergency.
And just to follow up, if there is a real emergency at some point, then the councillors will be perhaps inundated with questions from the public about what's going on. And if we don't know what's going on, then perhaps we should. So there has to be some kind of a protocol for the councillors as well to be able to point people in the proper direction. So that's, in my mind, something that needs to be done, because they're not going to call the CAO because they don't know the CAO, but they will call the ward councillor because they know the ward councillors.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I will make note of that definitely at our next meeting for something that we should practice as far as protocol in the next exercise. So, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 12. If anybody has thought of other business since we approve the agenda, please feel free to bring it forward. Mayor Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure why people don't know this already, but I had a meeting at the hospital this week, and there's some really good news coming out of the hospital. It was not a secret. It was media was there, the province was there, and so there's going to be some big changes in the hospital build. We're not going to be Frankensteining in the hospital. We're going to be getting a brand new build on the property next to the hospital. I don't know why no one's talking about it because it's a very good news story, and it's going to be millions and millions and millions of dollars cheaper than trying to Frankenstein the hospital that we're working on. So we have the example of Woodstock, a brand new build in Cambridge where you can't find the front door, and those are the examples that we were using when we were deciding what we were going to do with the hospital. So it's good news for the county of Brant and for the city of Brantford because the new build is also going to be happening with the Willet. So I'm not sure why people aren't sort of jumping up and down with joy because I thought it was a good day.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Just one other item of other business, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping that through the mayor and on behalf of members of council, we can congratulate the newly elected chief at Six Nations, Ms. Hill, and the councillors that were elected as well, just as a congratulatory thing from the council.
Mr. Mayor?
He's probably already done that.
Yeah, we've already made arrangements, but unfortunately, she's being it's tonight, so it was a very quick appointment to the chair for the new chief. But yeah, we will certainly do all of that.
So for clarity, could you say who the chair is? Miss Hill?
Sherry Lynn Hill.
Sherry Lynn Hill. Is she a relation to?
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure. Don't quote me.
Yeah. Sorry, when you said Miss Hill, I wasn't quite sure whether the previous Miss Hill had been reappointed. But thank you. Okay, that brings us to the point in the agenda where we go into camera. So I'm looking for a motion to go into camera. Councillor Howes, Councillor Oakley, all those in favour? Thank you. We'll take a couple of minutes break. So we're now back in open session. We're at item number 14, which is the next meeting, which I've got here is 2024, which is not very specific. So I guess that's to be defined and refined. So I'm looking for somebody to adjourn this meeting.